at all. And every one of Donald Trump's letters to these countries, every one of them in the last line says, and I, Donald Trump, can change any of these tariffs at any time, depending on, and this is the word he uses, our relationship with that country.
There was a time when allies stood close. Canada and Japan weren't just trading partners. They were pillars in America's global architecture, steady, reliable, and aligned. But today, those pillars are shifting. On July 10th, President Donald Trump announced a sweeping 35% tariff on all Canadian imports, effective August 1st. Just days earlier, Japan received notice of a 25% blanket tariff on its exports to the United States. These weren't isolated decisions. They were part of a larger pattern, one defined by disruption, volatility, and personal leverage. Allies who once believed in a stable trans-Pacific order are now asking a difficult question. If trust is gone, what's left to hold them here?
Trump goes on to say in that letter that if Canada raises its tariffs, quote, whatever number you choose to raise them by will be added onto the 35% that we charge.
Donald Trump's trade policy in 2025 has followed no conventional rulebook. Instead of structured trade frameworks, the president has relied on unilateral letters, announcing tariffs, shifting deadlines, and warning partners that duties could change based on the relationship. For Canada, the escalation has been relentless. After facing tariffs on aluminum, steel, and copper earlier this year, the new 35% duty stunned businesses across sectors. It came even as Canada was still in active bilateral negotiations with Washington, talks that were expected to conclude by July 21st. Rather than escalate publicly, Prime Minister Mark Carney chose a quieter path. Behind closed doors, his team worked to contain the fallout while simultaneously moving Canada's economic focus outward. Canada has intensified trade negotiations with ASEAN, and in July, its foreign minister confirmed progress on a new free trade agreement. At the same time, Ottawa signed a defense and intelligence sharing pact with Tokyo, expanding security coordination in the Indo-Pacific. In Japan, the response has been firmer, but no less strategic. The 25% tariff letter from Washington triggered strong language from Tokyo. The Japanese government rejected what it called economic coercion and emphasized its commitment to protect domestic industries and employment. Yet, even as negotiations with the U.S. continue, Japan is not waiting. Its economic ministers are expanding ties with Southeast Asia and Europe, reinforcing partnerships that don't come with strings attached. Taken together, the message is clear. Trump's tariff, first diplomacy, is no longer just a tactic. It's become a turning point, and it's pushing countries to build new bridges beyond Washington.
And I am here, the Carney government's first visit to the Indo-Pacific, my first visit to the Indo-Pacific, to stress the importance of multilateralism. Multilateralism in trade and economic matters in particular.
Japan and Canada have taken a major step forward in deepening their strategic ties by signing a security information sharing agreement.
The Indo-Pacific is no longer just a strategic concept. It's becoming a new center of gravity for countries seeking balance, stability, and multilateral cooperation. For Canada, that means finalizing its FTA with ASEAN, strengthening LNG exports to Asia, and leveraging its role as a supplier of critical minerals. In the past month, Canadian LG shipments have reached Malaysia, while Ottawa continues to court Petronas and other Asian energy players. Japan, meanwhile, is reinforcing its defense ties across the region and pushing for tighter cooperation with ASEAN nations, including Vietnam and Indonesia. Both nations' longtime U.S. allies are now rebalancing, not in protest, but out of necessity. Because in today's climate, diversification isn't just smart, it's essential. Trump promised 90 deals in 90 days, but what the world has seen are 90 days of confusion, letters sent, tariffs threatened, and no binding agreements in sight. In that void, trust is eroding. Canada and Japan aren't turning hostile. They're adapting quietly, pragmatically, and with long-term interests in mind. What's emerging isn't anti-American, it's post-American, a world where allies still value U.S. partnership but no longer build their future around it. Because allies don't wait forever, and when tariffs replace trust, the world moves on.
Another letter has been posted on True Social. The president writing to the leader of Brazil, saying that he's imposing a 50% tariff on all imports coming in from Brazil as soon as August. A Section 301 investigation into all imports coming in from Brazil.
On July 9th, 2025, the White House posted another tariff letter, this time aimed squarely at Brazil, a full 50% tariff on all imports, effective August 1st. It's the highest rate announced so far in this administration's latest wave of trade pressure. This move wasn't unexpected, but it was still jarring. For Brazil, it was a direct escalation. For the rest of the world, it was a warning, especially for nations still in negotiation or running out of time to get there. Canada and the European Union are both in the room with Trump's team, but they're not safe. They're on the clock. The Brazil letter did more than slap a high tariff. It triggered a formal Section 301 investigation into Brazilian imports, something Trump had used in his first term to justify long-term tariffs on Chinese goods. But what made this letter stand out wasn't the economics, it was the politics. In the post, Trump linked the decision to Brazil's handling of former President Jair Bolsonaro. He called it unfair. He called it a witch hunt. And that made the 50% tariff not just about trade, but about power. Brazil didn't get a negotiation window, it got a punishment. The kind that doesn't start with a phone call, it starts with a headline. And with that, Brazil became the latest example of how this White House is using tariffs not only to correct trade imbalances, but to send political messages.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU was working closely with the Trump administration to reach a deal.
Well, in Ottawa, the PMO says Canada's July 21st deadline is serious, and consequences for failing to meet the deadline for Canada aren't known.
While Brazil faces tariffs outright, the European Union and Canada are deep in negotiation, each on a tight ticking schedule. The EU is pushing hard to finalize a deal before August 1st. European Commission leaders confirmed that talks with the U.S. are active and making progress. Trade Chief Maros Šefčovič said a joint statement is close, but Italy's economy minister warned, it's complicated. The text may not be finished until the last minute. Canada, meanwhile, is working against a different clock. Prime Minister Mark Carney's team is negotiating under a July 21st deadline, 10 days earlier than Europe's. This special cutoff reflects how Trump's team has chosen to handle Canada separately after Canada dropped its digital services tax on June 30th to reopen talks. Unlike the EU, Canada is keeping things quiet. No daily briefings, no policy statements, just back-channel movement. And that silence might be deliberate because in this game, what isn't said can be just as important as what is. Still, both regions are in the same position. Negotiate fast or face tariffs soon. The threat isn't distant. It's set to arrive August 1st. The Trump administration has said over 20 nations could face tariffs in the coming weeks if they don't enter negotiations. On July 10th, the White House confirmed more tariff notices would roll out in phases, targeting sectors like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and other strategic supply chain goods. This reflects a shift in strategy. The new tariff wave isn't just about trade balances, it's about alignment. Countries seen as moving closer to China could face heightened scrutiny. In that light, Brazil's case stands out. The 50% tariff paired with a Section 301 investigation came amid concern over its strengthening ties with Beijing. In response, China has warned that countries signing deals with the U.S. that harm its interests may face retaliation. This is no longer just trade policy. It's positioning in a global contest, and the consequences will be economic. What happened with Brazil wasn't just about one country, it was about setting the tone. Trump is reshaping trade not through global frameworks, but through pressure and pacing. Some countries get letters, others get deadlines. But all of them now face a decision: move fast or pay the price. For the EU, the calendar says July 31st. For Canada, it's July 21st. For the rest, the time is shrinking and the tariffs are already written. This isn't just a negotiation anymore, it's a countdown.
When the person you're dealing with, or the country you're dealing with, has multiple objectives, it jumps around a bit, and you've got to be nimble.
If we do see some trade deals coming through, obviously with our country, that would be, I think, a big boost.
President Trump has set the clock ticking toward August 1st, the day when his new global tariff framework kicks in with import taxes of 10% to 70% for countries that don't sign trade deals in time. And while many governments are scrambling to meet the deadline, one country has taken a different path: Canada. In this final stretch, with pressure mounting and time running out, the world is watching whether Prime Minister Mark Carney will bend to Trump's demands or make the most calculated gamble of his career. With tariffs looming, markets rallied on hope. Wall Street bet that Canada would fold quickly, just like others had. Trump had already declared his intent. If a deal wasn't reached by July 21st, tariffs would rise automatically. No more grace periods, no more backroom extensions. And yet, Canada didn't fold. No major concessions were announced, no dramatic press conferences, no movement at the podium. Instead, there was a calm, strategic silence. The usual Trump playbook, high pressure, short timeline, visible chaos, was met with something unexpected: restraint. Investors kept waiting for news. Business leaders, especially those in steel and automotive supply chains, feared the worst. But from Ottawa, the only response was stillness. Carney's approach emphasized how Canada can help the White House on China, on balance of trade issues, on protections for workers, and on border security. Behind that silence was Prime Minister Mark Carney. A former central banker, Carney wasn't looking to play by Trump's rules. Instead of bargaining point by point, he shifted the game entirely. At the Calgary Stampede, Carney addressed Albertans directly, not just with words, but with strategy. He called on Canadians to focus inward, on housing, on clean energy, on rebuilding economic independence. He knew what Trump wanted: quick wins, bold headlines. But Carney wasn't playing for the moment. He was playing for stability. Rather than debating dairy quotas or aluminum percentages, Carney brought something different to the table: value. Canada, he argued, could help the U.S. where it mattered: on trade with China, on labor protections, on border security. This wasn't just a defense, it was a repositioning, a way to say, we're not your opponent, we're your ally in a bigger fight. And it started working. Markets across North America responded with optimism. The TSX and S&P 500 both hit record highs during the first week of July. According to Bloomberg, much of that optimism stemmed from perceived progress in the U.S.-Canada talks, especially after Canada stepped away from the digital services tax that had angered Washington. But that optimism might have been premature, because while Trump's team expected a full deal by July 21st, Carney wasn't rushing. The days ticked down, Trump grew louder, but Carney remained still. And that's when Trump faced a problem he hadn't planned for. What happens when the pressure doesn't work? If Canada holds firm past July 21st, Trump must make a decision. Either follow through with punishing tariffs, which could trigger job losses across border states, or back down and risk looking weak.
Reach a deal. And I just wonder what you think about what messaging should be going out to Canadians in a moment that it seems precarious, but of course we don't really know.
I think folks are just hoping to hear from their Prime Minister and from Canadian officials that they're on it and that they're doing everything they can and that they have Canadians back.
The economic stakes are real. Canada's services PMI fell to 44.3 in June, according to S&P Global, well below growth thresholds. U.S. companies, especially in auto parts and logistics, are already cutting forecasts due to uncertainty over cross-border flows. Both economies would suffer, but politically, Carney has space to wait. Polls show Canadians understand the stakes and the personality across the table. Trump, on the other hand, has no such room. His trade narrative depends on fast, visible wins. Delays don't just cost time, they cost credibility. In this trade standoff, Trump has the microphone, but Carney holds the clock. The louder Trump pushes, the more his own deadline becomes a trap. And the longer Carney waits, the more he turns Trump's strength into a vulnerability. This isn't about who talks more. It's about who understands the moment better. And right now, silence is speaking louder than ever.